Net. The night I found out, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just stood in the hallway of my own house, holding a grocery bag with a six-pack and a rotisserie chicken. And I felt something I'd never felt before in 41 years of living. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even sadness. It was the slow, quiet collapse of everything I thought was real. My name is Daniel. I'm 43 years old. I work in construction management, which means I spend half my life reading blueprints and the other half making sure other people don't make expensive mistakes. I'm good at my job because I pay attention to details, small things, the kind of things most people walk right past. I wish I'd paid that same attention at home. My wife and I had been married for 11 years. We met when I was 32 and she was 29, at a mutual friend's backyard cookout in Columbus, Ohio. She was laughing at something someone said, and I remember thinking that her laugh was the most natural sound I'd ever heard. Not performed, not polished, just real. I introduced myself. We talked for 4 hours straight. 6 months later, I proposed on a Tuesday evening in her mother's kitchen because she'd always said grand gestures made her nervous. We built something good. A house in a quiet neighborhood in Dublin, a suburb outside Columbus. 2 dogs. A vegetable garden she started and I maintained after she got tired of it. Date nights every other Friday. We weren't perfect, but we were solid. Or at least, I thought we were. My best friend's name is Marcus. We met in college, stayed close through everything. Job changes, moves, bad relationships, his divorce 6 years ago. He was the best man at my wedding. He helped me install the kitchen backsplash the year we moved in, when my father passed 3 years ago. Marcus drove 4 hours in the middle of the night just to sit with me. That's the kind of person I thought he was. He lived about 20 minutes from us. He and my wife had always gotten along fine, friendly, casual, the way your spouse and your best friend are supposed to get along. Holiday dinners. The occasional group hangout, nothing that ever registered as anything more than that. I was wrong about a lot of things that year. It started, as these things often do, with something small. My wife began going to the gym more frequently, which I had no problem with. I'd actually been trying to get her to come with me for years. But she started going at odd times. 7 in the evening, 9 at night, sometimes before I was even awake on Saturday mornings. Then it was the phone. She'd always been open with her phone before. Not because we had a policy about it, just because there was never any reason not to be. But sometime around February, she started keeping it face down on every surface, started taking it into the bathroom, started responding to texts with this tiny, careful expression I'd never seen on her face before. I told myself I was being paranoid. She worked in marketing and was managing a big campaign. People text at weird hours. I am not a jealous man by nature, and I have always believed that suspicion without evidence is just insecurity wearing a detective costume. So I watched, and I waited, and I told myself I was imagining things. Then one afternoon in March, I came home early from a job site because we'd had to halt work after a subcontractor issue. I walked in through the garage, set my boots by the door, and heard her on the phone in the kitchen. She wasn't shouting or whispering, just talking in this relaxed, warm voice I hadn't heard her use with me in a while. I stopped in the hallway. "I know," she was saying. "I know, but we have to be careful. He's not stupid." I stood completely still. "Next weekend works. He'll be at the conference in Pittsburgh. We'll have the whole time." I didn't walk into that kitchen. I don't know why. Some part of me already knew, I think, and wasn't ready to make it real yet. I backed up quietly, went back into the garage, and sat in my truck for 20 minutes with the engine off. She said he. She wasn't talking about me. When I came back inside, she was standing at the stove and she smiled at me like everything was completely normal. I smiled back. I asked about her day. She told me about a meeting that went long. I told her about the subcontractor problem. We ate dinner together, and I watched her the way you watch a movie you've seen before, but are only now understanding the ending of. I still didn't know who it was. The conference in Pittsburgh was real. I'd been registered for a construction industry summit the 3rd weekend of March, 2 weeks away. I'd been planning to go. Overnight Thursday through Saturday. Now I had a different plan. I didn't cancel my registration. I told my wife I was looking forward to it. I packed a bag the Thursday morning before I left, kissed her on the cheek, and drove to Pittsburgh. I checked into my hotel. I attended the Thursday afternoon sessions. I had dinner with 2 colleagues, and then on Friday morning I checked out, told everyone I had a family situation, drove straight back to Columbus, and parked 2 blocks from my house at 11 in the morning. Marcus's truck was in my driveway. I sat in my car for a long time. The sun was out. It was one of those sharp, cold March days where the sky is brutally clear and the light has no warmth in it at all. I watched his truck. I watched my house. I felt something calcify inside me. Some soft part of me that had still been hoping I was wrong, hardened permanently into something else. I drove to my brother's place on the other side of town. My brother is 4 years older than me and is the least dramatic person I've ever met in my life. I sat down at his kitchen table and I told him everything. He listened without interrupting. When I was done, he poured us both a cup of coffee and said, "What do you want to do?" I told him I needed 2 things: time and a lawyer. He nodded and said I could stay there as long as I needed. I called an attorney that afternoon, not the kind who advertises on bus benches, a real one, someone my brother's colleague had used and recommended. Her name was Patricia. She was direct and efficient, and within 10 minutes of our phone call had told me exactly what I needed to document, what I needed to avoid doing, and what my position looked like in Ohio under the circumstances. "Do not confront her yet," Patricia said. "Not until we have the paperwork ready." I asked how long that would take. 3 weeks if we move quickly," she said. "Can you hold it together for 3 weeks?" I said yes. Those 3 weeks were the strangest of my life. I went home. I slept next to my wife. I had dinner with her. I watched television with her on the couch. She never knew. Or as she suspected, she gave no sign of it. She was warm with me during that time, warmer than she had been in months, which I now understand was guilt operating as affection. Marcus texted me twice during those 3 weeks, asking if I wanted to catch a game. I responded both times. Normal, friendly, brief. Nothing to suggest anything had changed. He had no idea I knew. I want to be clear about something. The hardest part of those 3 weeks was not pretending with my wife. The hardest part was pretending with him. Because with her, there was grief underneath the pretending. But with Marcus, there was nothing underneath it. Just a clean, cold absence where a 20-year friendship used to be. I also did something during those 3 weeks that Patricia had not specifically advised, but had not told me not to do. I went through 11 years of joint finances with a level of attention I had never brought to them before. Savings accounts, investment accounts, the equity in the house. I made a list of everything. I understood my own life with a clarity that would have been almost impressive if it hadn't been so painful. I moved my personal savings, the money I had earned before the marriage, which had always been kept in an account under only my name, to a new bank entirely. Patricia confirmed this was legal and advised. I also, quietly, began having conversations with a realtor I trusted. Not to sell the house, just to understand what it was worth and what my options looked like. Knowledge is not action, but it is preparation. The papers were ready on a Friday. My wife had made plans to go visit her sister that weekend in Cincinnati, a trip she'd mentioned 2 weeks before, a real trip, as far as I could tell. A different kind of absence than the Pittsburgh weekend. I didn't ask too many questions about it. She left Saturday morning. I watched her pull out of the driveway from the bedroom window. Then I made 2 phone calls. The first was to Marcus. I asked if he wanted to grab lunch. He said sure, named a place. We met at a diner about halfway between our houses, the same diner we'd been going to since we were 22 years old. He was already there when I arrived, already had his coffee, was looking at his phone. He looked up and smiled when I walked in. The same smile. Completely unchanged. We ordered. We talked about the usual things for about 10 minutes. A project I was managing. His job. Some mutual friends. Then I set my phone on the table and I played him a recording. I had recorded one conversation. The week before, when I came home and she was on the phone in the bedroom. I had set my phone outside the partially open door and let it run. I'm not proud of it. But I needed something that wasn't just my word against theirs. The recording was about 40 seconds long. Her voice, clear as anything. His name. The plans. Specific enough that there was nothing to interpret. Marcus stopped talking. The color left his face in a way that was almost interesting to watch from a purely clinical standpoint. I picked my phone back up. I put it in my pocket. "I'm not here to fight with you," I said. "And I'm not here to hear an explanation. I'm here because you've been my best friend for 20 years, and I thought you at least deserved to be told to your face." He started to say something. I held up one hand. "Don't," I said. He closed his mouth. The papers were filed this morning, I said. She'll be served when she gets back tomorrow. I've already talked to a lawyer about the house and everything else. I'm not asking for anything dramatic. I just want it to be over. I left cash on the table for my half of the check. I stood up. I looked at him one more time. This man I had known since we were 22 years old, who had stood next to me at my wedding, who had driven through the night when my father died, and then I walked out. I have not spoken to him since. My wife was served the next morning, Sunday, when she pulled back into our driveway at 11 a.m. I was not there. I had stayed at my brother's place Saturday night as planned, and I had asked Patricia to arrange for the process server to be there on my behalf. She called me 4 times that Sunday afternoon. I did not answer. She texted, "Daniel, what is this? Please call me. I don't understand." I did not respond. She called my brother. He told her calmly that I was fine and that I would not be returning to the house that day, and that she should expect to hear from my attorney on Monday morning. She called my mother, who I had spoken to the previous Wednesday over dinner at her house, who had listened to me talk for 2 hours and had held my hand and not said a word against anyone, simply told her that this was between us and that she hoped everything worked out peacefully. The calls and texts continued through Sunday evening and into Monday. Not angry. I want to be accurate about this. She was not angry, at least not then. She was panicked. There's a difference. Anger comes from a place of feeling wronged. Panic comes from suddenly understanding the weight of what you've done when the consequences finally arrive. On Tuesday, she left a voicemail that I did listen to, though only once. She said she knew she had made terrible choices. She said she was sorry. She said she loved me and that she had never stopped loving me and she didn't know how things had gotten so far, and she just needed to talk to me. I did not call back. I want to be honest here about something. There was a part of me, listening to that voicemail, that wanted to call back. 11 years is not nothing. The woman on that voicemail was still, in some register I couldn't fully shut off, the woman I had loved. The one whose laugh I could pick out of a crowded room. The one who fell asleep in the middle of movies and pretended she hadn't. That was still real. It had existed. But the conference weekend was also real. Marcus's truck in my driveway was also real. The 40 seconds of recording was also real. And the 3 weeks I'd spent lying next to her every night, holding all of that inside me while she slept peacefully. That was real too, and it had cost me something I would never entirely get back. So I did not call back. The divorce took 7 months from filing to finalization. Ohio is a no-fault state. But asset division still required negotiation. Patricia was excellent. We reached an agreement that was fair by any reasonable standard. I kept the house. I had more equity in it from before the marriage, and we divided everything else down the middle without significant dispute. She didn't fight it. I think she understood, somewhere in the process, that fighting it would have required her to sit across a table from me and justify herself, and she wasn't prepared to do that. I heard, through people we knew, that Marcus had told her about the diner meeting, that he had told her I played a recording. I don't know what she thought of that. I don't know what either of them thought of me during those months. I realized at some point that I had stopped caring what they thought, which was its own kind of grief. Not because I wanted their approval, but because caring what someone thinks is a form of connection, and losing that connection, even with people who had hurt you, leaves a hole. Marcus and my wife are still together, as far as I know. I heard it from a mutual friend about 4 months after the divorce was finalized, delivered with the careful, apologetic tone people use when they're not sure whether information will hurt you or help you close a door. I don't know how I felt about it. I sat with it for a few days and then I put it down. I live in my house alone now, with both dogs. My wife had asked about the dogs in the early negotiations, and I had said simply that I would be keeping them, and Patricia had included that in the first draft of our agreement, and my wife had not pushed back. I think even she knew that was the right outcome. The vegetable garden is mine now. I didn't replant it last spring. I wasn't ready. But I turned the soil over in the fall, conditioned it, and this spring I put in tomatoes, peppers, and a row of green beans along the back fence. The dogs sit out there with me on Saturday mornings when the weather is good. It's quiet. It's mine. I want to say something to anyone who might be standing in their own hallway right now, holding something ordinary, a grocery bag, a set of keys, and feeling the floor shift underneath them. I want to say something useful. What I learned is this. The pain of betrayal is not the worst part. The worst part is the audit. Going back through memory and re-examining everything you thought was true. Every moment you were certain of something. And understanding that certainty is not the same as accuracy. That's the part that takes the longest. That's the part that wakes you up at 3 in the morning for months. But the audit ends. It does end. You finish going through it all and you find what's still solid, and you build from there. I am not angry anymore. I want to be clear about that too. Not because what happened was acceptable. It wasn't. But because anger requires ongoing investment. And I have other things I'd rather invest in now. My work. My brother and his family. My mother's Sunday dinners. The dogs. The garden. My name is Daniel. I'm 43 years old. And I came home from a conference I never actually attended. And I walked out of a diner. And I didn't answer the phone. And I grew a garden. Some endings don't announce themselves with fire. Sometimes they're just a man in a truck, 2 blocks from his own house, watching the driveway go quiet and deciding, very calmly, what comes next. That was me. And I am okay.